Alright, this is going to be a little bit of a different tack for this video. No damage. Figured I'd show off my homemade motorized bike. It's a monster. So it's a full suspension mountain bike. And closer here. I completely redesigned the rear suspension. All of that stuff, like this pivot here used to be on the tube here, on the down tube. Well, there was a little mount that was welded to the down tube. It didn't go through it like this. And then this shock was actually on the end, and it was inside the frame here. And, well, I needed that room for the engine, so I moved the whole thing out back. The whole rear suspension is now, I mean, that's in the stock position, but the whole rear suspension is outboard of the rear, you know, the rear seat tube now. So it's the exact same amount of leverage. The tire has the exact same amount of leverage over the shock. It just changed from like a type 1 lever with the pivot in the middle to a type 2 lever with the pivot on the end. Or that might be backwards. It might have changed from a type 2 to a type 1. I can't remember the types, but it's, you know, different type of leverage, but the same amount. The engine is a 2 horsepower Honda GXH50, and it's got a direct drive pulley with a belt drive on it, and that has been an awesome deal. I mean, I had a chain with a centrifugal clutch on there, and it would just destroy the chain, because chains are not made for high speed, low torque applications. They're made for high torque, low speed applications. So it works fine on the final drive over there. You can see here, there's the motor goes back and drives the jack shaft, and on this side, I've got a number 35 chain, which is the secondary that drives this, and that's this. This actually freewheels around my crank. So the crank, it's hard to get my hands on things and focus right, but the crank will drive the chain. I just moved it off of my prop here. Hold on. I just got it propped up against the picnic table. Anyway, the pedals will drive the chain, and that's actually how you start the motor as well. So it's direct drive, but then as soon as the motor takes over, that just spins around the crank and drives the rear, and your crank can stay still. So it doesn't like beat the crap out of your legs. You know, you don't have to pedal a million miles an hour, because this thing does get up to 60 at times. If you're on dead level with no wind at all, top speed's around 50. Sometimes it'll go up to 60 if you're going down a bit of a hill or have a little bit of a tailwind. And you can see it's full suspension. I got disc brake in the front. I still have a Bulldog style brake in the rear. I plan to change that over to a disc brake in the rear also at some point. But I don't really use the rear brake very much. I mostly use the front. I guess I do use it sometimes. Well, let's see. No, that's right. I got rid of the rear brake lever. So I have this tuned. This is here, let me get it in view here. It's a dual pull front brake lever. So, and I have the front, so it's not focused very well, but the front grabs significantly more than the rear, the way I have the cables tuned. And I don't know if you can see this funky strap that I have going down here, because I broke the frame. You can see where I have some work to do to it this summer to get it tuned up again. This is broken right here. The frame broke all the way across, because where I cut into the frame a good bit and tigged this motor plate on, I made it weak there. So I'm going to have to retig this and then put some reinforcements along here, which I might use just some angle that kind of matches this. So it'll be like a piece up and out, like a V piece, and then a little bit of a fender, which will help keep the motor clean. And so the rear, this is an internally geared hub. It's a Nuvinci N360, and it's shifted with this guy right here. It's infinitely adjustable, so let me show you this. Try and focus on it there. You can see the little guy with the hill there. So see, that's, you twist it forward for higher gear, twist it back for, and you don't really want to twist it very far without the wheel turning, because you know, it has to adjust itself before you get to the end of the cable tension. So yeah, it's got with the internally geared rear hub and 2 horsepower. This thing has a very nice low gear, has a very nice high gear, and I did have to mess around with the reductions on this and the secondary jack shaft a little bit to get it just right where I want it. So I have a gear that's as low as I want and can still go really fast. My gas tank is just a 1-gallon gas container, and kind of got a funky little vent that just happens to fit perfectly in the holes. I guess they were for, I don't know, bungee cords or something. I don't know, it just happens to fit perfectly in there. And I got it held on with a, you know, a hose clamp doubled up. It's a little funky, but man, this thing is a monster. And the things that I have to do to it this year, besides this, I gotta fix the point where the frame broke. But the engine right now is in pretty bad shape. It needs a new set of rings, and I need to hone the cylinder on it, because by the end of last summer it was eating oil. There's no tack on this thing. I have a speed addiction, and so basically I scored the cylinder walls and ruined the ring in it because I was just giving it way too much throttle all the time. The carburetor air filter is a little funky. I had to really squish it in. I made my own. I mean, the stock airbox would not fit on there at all. So I just made this very narrow air filter and smashed it in there. It's a homemade jobby out of sheet metal and, you know, some stock air breather kind of a thing. You can see it was one of those, like a metal mesh filter kind of. It's pretty dirty. Doesn't have a pre-filter on it, but it does work. I mean, you know, it is what it is. Thing hauls ass. And you can like jump logs, headed uphill through the woods with it. It's a monster. The other thing I have to do is get more tension on this derailleur. It's just got the stock spring on it. I might just buy a single speed tensioner that's made for, you know, like a fixie bike, and then put just a bigger spring on it or something. I don't know, because that's just not quite enough tension. I've noticed some problems with that. It'll derail itself off of the sprocket that's on the internally geared hub there. And I got some pretty good tires on it that are kind of like an all-terrain tread. They do well on the road and they do well off the road. And my light is it's like a off-road fog light that you'd put on a truck, and it's super bright. I actually run that on a 14.4 volt battery pack, and I have plans to actually bump that up to 28 volts, make it even brighter. I might do a high-low, like a 14.4 volt high or low, and then a 28 volt high, because that'll take up to 36. And you know, my seat's getting a little worn out. I got a little bike bag with some tools in it. But this sucker is a monster. The rear suspension is great. I love it with my back, because, you know, I've broken I've broken my back 5 times. I can't really show you how good the suspension is because I don't have anybody else to hold the camera while I push on it, but get a good focus here. That's my monster. Definitely have some work to do to it before it's ready to get up and running this year, but I'll get it. The frame is the biggest thing, and of course, you know, well, it's all crucial. It's not really rideable until I fix all 3 of those things. I gotta hole in the cylinder, put new rings in it, fix the frame where it broke, and then get a better tensioner on the rear end, and then it'll be back up to riding shape again. And it's just starting to get warm out here in Montana, so I plan to have this thing out and riding it again here very soon. It's a lot of fun.